Hi everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel, and today is a very rainy kind of day, so the lighting is a little bit weird. It has a little bit of a shadowy element to it, so I do apologize for that, but there's really not much I can do because I cannot control the weather.
I'm cold too.
Well, damn, Jackie, I can't control the weather.
Also, if my voice sounds a little bit weird and I sound a little bit stuffy, it is because I am getting over a cold. So I do kind of feel a little bit congested still, but thankfully I don't have like a sore throat anymore, and I do feel a little bit more clear. So I figured I would finally get to do my February wrap up. Yes, it is already March 10th when I'm filming this. So yeah, I mean, we're rolling with it now. Like, I feel like this is as much as we can do at this point. Also, I do want to mention that March is my birth month, so I am going to have hopefully some really fun videos coming out this month. So definitely subscribe to my channel to be able to check out those videos. I have some fun things planned, so hopefully I can see them to fruition and I don't get sick again. Okay, so let's start off with the books that I finished in February. I only finished 4 books in the month of February because unfortunately I ended up getting into a really gnarly reading slump. Like, I am talking about, like, I could not read any books for like 2, almost 3 weeks. It was horrible. And I haven't had a reading slump this bad for, like, I would say at least a year. Like, all of last year I surprisingly did not really get into a reading slump. I was pretty good about reading books and like keeping a really good steady pace, but this year I am finding it so difficult. I feel like I have collected all of my, what were supposed to be my past reading slumps, and now I'm cashing in on all of my slumps. So the beginning of this year has been a little bit slow, but February was just really rough for me, just horrible. And so, I mean, I started off with a really disappointing book, and that was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. And if you have seen my most anticipated books of 2023 videos, you will know that this book was pretty high up on that list. Like, I was so excited about this book. I was so prepared for it to be like a new favorite. The way that it was pitched seemed like the perfect book for me. Like, it kept getting compared to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and also The Inheritance of Arcadia Divina, which I loved both of those books. Literal 5-star reads for me, and I just, if you recommend me a book and say that you compare it to those 2 books, like, I will automatically read it. But unfortunately, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride just did not live up to those standards for me. I know a lot of people who have read the ARC copy have already absolutely loved it, so I am definitely in the minority opinion for this book, because I rated it 1 star. I was so disappointed by this book, I have to say. And I was able to get an advanced audiobook copy from Libro FM, so thank you to Libro FM for that. And I guess like the silver lining of that is that I didn't have to buy this book and then be disappointed by it. I thankfully had a free copy. But also, this was my first Roshni Chokshi book in full. I have started 2 of her other books in the past, but then never ended up finishing them for one reason or another. It was typically because I would try to read them during a slump to get me out of a slump, and it just never really worked. So I just figured, like, oh, maybe I just had like really bad luck with like starting her books at the wrong time. So I was like, I'm gonna start this book at the perfect time, like in the beginning of the month, no slump, and we're gonna love it. And unfortunately, I just did not. And I talk about it more in my book review on Goodreads, so I will try to link to that in the description. But basically, I had 3 issues with this book, and that was the format was wrong. And by format, I mean just the way that it was told in like dual perspectives. I felt like that just did not work for this book. Basically, if you didn't know, it is told in dual perspectives, one coming from the husband of one of the characters, and then also the friend of one of the characters, and I just felt like the husband character and that entire perspective was not needed at all. And I know that it kind of ties into what happens at the end, but I just felt like it was so unnecessary, because every time we got to his chapters, it was basically useless, a couple of pages, and I didn't feel like the character's voice was strong enough, and I just couldn't get myself to care about this husband character. I felt like it was a total distraction from what the actual book was supposed to be about, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. And I think that it also held the story back from being its best that it could be. And I feel like this book, and I say this about a lot of books, especially books that are a bit shorter, that I feel like they could have been stronger if they had just been a novella or even a short story. Like, I don't feel like this specific story needed to be a fully fleshed out novel, because I feel like so much of it was redundant at the end of the day. You could have cut out the husband perspective, cut out quite a bit of the redundant scenes and scenes that just didn't really lead anywhere, and it could have been a really great novella, or it could have been part of a really great short story collection. But this format just didn't work for me. Secondly, I felt like slapping the adult label on this book felt a little random to me. Like, it just didn't seem to fit with what the actual story was and how it was being told. Because if you hadn't told me that this was an adult novel, I would have just thought it was a typical YA novel. It should have just been YA. Like, I don't see the reason why it was labeled as adult, because there's not necessarily anything that is very graphic in nature or even very adult in nature. The entire story, I would say about like 85 to 90% of the book, is about these two teenage girls. And I feel like if you're going to be writing about two teenage girls and there's nothing really graphic or adult in nature about the story, why is it adult? Like, what made it adult? Was it just to put like the higher price tag on it? Because adult hardcovers are significantly more expensive than YA hardcovers? Is it because there has been a trend recently of YA authors transferring over to adult literature, and this just kind of felt like a little bandwagon? I'm not really sure. No judgment at all to like the author or anything, but like judgment to the publishing house for this book, because I don't understand the reason why it was labeled as adult. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then third, my third issue with this book was that I felt like it was too high concept, and it was ultimately a lackluster and underwhelming execution. I've noticed this a lot, especially with adult literature coming from YA authors, is that it is high concept. There's a lot going on here. It's really trying to do a lot of stuff at one time, and I feel like the execution never really pushes far enough for me. And like, for me, I felt like this story needed something and needed an author that was willing to go more in depth, more below the surface of what the story was actually about. Like, I felt like we really were kept on top of the surface, kind of kept at arm's length, if you will. And I just never felt fully immersed within the story. And this could have been fully complex and textured and layered and, you know, had a lot of grit to it and a lot of like depth. But I never felt like we were allowed to go and dive into that. And that could have also been because of the perspective and the dual perspective at that. It just felt like we were never fully let into the story. And I think that maybe it was the author trying to keep this air of mystery about this story, but I felt like it just did itself a disservice by trying to be too mysterious. We needed to be let in just a little bit more. And I just want to repeat what I said in the very last paragraph of my review, where I said, "This book had so much potential of being a sweeping, layered, and complex story about the codependent and toxic relationship between these two young women who deeply believe in magic that may or may not be real. Unfortunately, it underdelivered on its promise and left me wanting more while being deeply confused as to where it all went wrong." And I feel like that sums up my feelings about this book perfectly. Okay, so moving on from The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I don't want to spend the entire video talking about that book, but I figured that since I've only read 4 books in February, I would spend a lot of time talking about that book because it was the whole reason for my slump. So thanks a lot. The second book that I read in February was much better than the first one, and that was Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, which I love C.L. Polk. I read The Midnight Bargain, I want to say, was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago? Last year? 2 years ago? 3 years ago? Gosh. Time, I swear, I know I say this in almost every single video, but time is an enigma to me at this point. But I did read The Midnight Bargain from C.L. Polk, and I love that book so much. I recommend it to everybody. It is so good. If you love Bridgerton, if you love The Handmaid's Tale, that kind of vibe, definitely check it out. It's really good, really magical, whimsical almost, but also very much about like misogyny and sexism and stuff like that. So highly recommend that book. But Even Though I Knew the End is actually like this more noir sort of genre book, but it was actually really cute because it wasn't like super serious. It had a lot of really humorous moments, and also this is centered around a queer sapphic relationship, which I love. I believe that both of the characters are lesbians. I don't think it ever says it within the text, but it's heavily implied that they're lesbians, which I love because I am always looking for more sapphic and lesbian representation. So I really enjoyed this book. It's kind of more a novella. It's very short, very sweet. And I felt like despite being a novella, which I feel like can be a bit tricky for some authors, it felt very well-rounded as an actual story. And like I said, it does have this noir feel to it because it is following these like magical detectives in Chicago back in like, and I think it's supposed to have this sort of like early 20th century feel, which is really fun. And I just highly recommend it. It's a fun, quick read. I think that if you listen to the audiobook and you listen to it at 2 times speed, you can listen to it in like an hour, hour and a half. It is very quick. It definitely helped me kind of climb out of that slump that I was in, so highly recommend. The third book that I read in February was actually one of my Kindle Unlimited books, which I was very proud of myself because I need to read more of those, and that was Blind Date with a Book Boyfriend by Lucy Eden. And I gave this one a 4 to 5 stars. I also gave the last book a 4 to 5 stars, if I didn't mention that already. But I did really enjoy this book. It's another pretty quick read. I think that it was just a little over 200 pages, maybe even less than that. I can't remember honestly, but it was very quick. I read it in like 1 or 2 sittings. And it kind of has that like love at first sight, almost like very much, if you don't like insta love, you're probably not gonna like this book, but I personally have a soft spot for insta love, and so I personally really enjoyed it. I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea. I know that a lot of people actually like hate insta love, so I totally understand. It's not going to be a book for everybody, but I thought it was adorable. Basically, it's about this young woman, and she has flown into Los Angeles in order to prepare for a job interview, like this very big job interview. She is like in tech, I believe. And while she's there in Los Angeles, she ends up going to actually the Ripped Bodice, which is a romance themed bookstore in LA. I have personally never been, even though I live in California, and I don't go to LA a lot, but I have been quite a few times, and I should have gone to the Ripped Bodice at some point, but I haven't yet. I definitely want to. But she goes to the Ripped Bodice and she ends up meeting this guy there who also really loves romance books, and they hit it off and they kind of go on this whirlwind date like that day. And it's adorable. It is so cute. They get into so many little hijinks and they have really great chemistry. There's definitely a really fun twist within this book that I thought was kind of cool and interesting and made for some good like tension. And yeah, I mean, overall it was a cute book. It kind of reads a little bit like fan fiction, so if you're not into fan fiction, you might not like it. However, I was raised on fan fiction, so I love anything that's like kind of fanfic-y. And I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful, and it was a fun little fluffy book that I kind of got to read a little bit after Valentine's Day. And the last book that I read in February was Mame by Jessica George, and I actually got this one from Libro FM as well, which is really nice. Another one of those like audiobook arcs. And I also gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it. Basically, it's kind of like this coming of age story about a young woman in her 20s, and she has been caring for her father who has late stage Parkinson's, and she kind of feels like she is beholden to her family. She has a younger brother who doesn't seem to like do anything for the family really, and then she also has a mom who is always going off to Nigeria to help her family, and I think that her family runs like a hotel or something like that. So Maddie is kind of left to her own devices. She's kind of left to take care of her father, and she really wants some independence. She really wants to just break free from her family and go out on her own for a little while. And when she gets fired from her job, she takes that as like the perfect opportunity to move out and find a place of her own and get a job that she actually loves and really cares about. So she's able to do that, and basically the story is just like her finding herself and figuring out adult life, and also dealing with her father's illness and all of that kind of stuff. Just like a lot of family drama issues. And if you know me, if you've been watching my videos, you know that I love some good family drama. It's kind of like one of my favorite things to read about in fiction, and that coupled with a coming of age narrative is just like my full cup of tea. I thought that the book was really well done. I will say, I do want to mention that there is a little bit of biphobia in this book. This main character is kind of sheltered a little bit, and she is really trying to figure out like everything, and she ends up dating this one guy who is bisexual, and she at first is kind of like a little weird about it, a little bit like, I don't really know what this means, I don't really know how I should feel about this. And she ends up talking to one of her really good friends who's a lesbian, and is like, hey, when did you know, or how did you know that you were a lesbian? You know, it's whatever. They have this whole conversation about how the friend knew she was a lesbian and wasn't bisexual, and how like bisexuality is a thing and it's like normal and totally fine. And the main character does end up understanding what bisexuality is and accepting it and like being totally okay with it. But I know that a lot of people are not going to love that, or not going to love how it was represented or dealt with, and that is totally fine. Like, everybody can have their own opinions. I, however, as a bisexual person, didn't really feel any kind of way about it. I know that a lot of people have these really tough conversations, and I don't think that these tough conversations need to be completely eliminated from literature. I know that I have had these kind of conversations with friends, family, and it's totally normal. I don't hold that against them. But like I said, if that is like totally something that is uncomfortable for you, I think that it's good to know that before going into this book, so keep that in mind. But I, however, thought it was dealt with perfectly fine and really reminiscent of what it's like in real life to have these kind of conversations. So yeah, just thought I would mention that. But overall, I did really enjoy this book. I thought it was really well written, and I liked the main character a lot. I thought like she was naive, definitely, and made a lot of mistakes, but also learned from her mistakes and tried to do better, and was just kind of like very relatable 20-something-year-old. Like, I could totally see a lot of myself in her as well. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. I think that it's really a great coming of age novel, and if you're into like Sally Rooney, that kind of stuff, like, you'll really enjoy this book as well. Okay, so those are all of my thoughts on the 4 books that I read in February. I know, clap for me. I mean, I still feel like I'm in that slump a little bit. I feel like, especially after like a really tough slump, I would get kind of like the aftershocks of the slump, so like little mini slumps after it. But I'm hoping that I will have some like really exciting books to read in March, that it might make me want to read them a little bit more and might get me out of the slump. I think also I need to delete TikTok, because I have been spending so much time on TikTok. It is absolutely disgusting. So I might need to delete that app and like get off of TikTok for a little while. So yeah, down below in the comments, let me know all of the books that you read in February, which ones you loved, which ones you didn't like. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I read in February and what you thought about them. I would love to hear all of your opinions. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. Well, maybe not TikTok if I'm gonna like take a little bit of a break from there, but I mean, you could still follow me on TikTok. I mean, who knows? And yeah, I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Ooh,